Hi, my name is Maurice Engler from Merging Technologies. I'm a project manager, I'm a training expert, and a user of different merging products. I'm here to talk to you about Ovation today. Specifically about what is Ovation and what can you do with Ovation. On a very basic scheme, bringing you up to different types of working in different types of applications. But before that, I just want to briefly explain to you what we have in front of you and what are this gear or this possibility or these different types of gear able to do. First of all, we have here a Happy, which is a merging audio over IP converter. So with this box, I can convert some audio signal from analog to digital or digital to analog or digital to digital. I have different slots that I can mix and match different cards, basically AD DA cards or just AD or just DA cards or MADI cards. On the back of it, it will be connected to a Cat6 cable or Cat5e cable, which then goes into a workstation or an Ovation in this case. And this allows me to transport, to stream all the signal going in and out of this box over Ravenna, which is the IP protocol, or over AS67. Then there is a bigger box than this one, which is called Horus, which has more slots, so more I/O, which has by default some MADI also. Both boxes have some ASEBU I/Os. And of course, I can have over network because I could put a specific switch in between and connect different devices. So it brings me to have in a theater or in an opera or somewhere else or in an installation the possibility to have a Happy device at one place because it has some mic inputs at this specific place, and then some Horus at another place because it needs many outputs at this place to go to loudspeaker or something like that. So I can really, and of course disconnect it to an Ovation, for example, to play out the medias. So this can really be managed as you want, and which is fantastic. It gives you all the flexibility of an IP network. Good. Coming now to Ovation itself. Ovation, first of all, is a system that applies to different types of application, and I'm going to try to give you an overview of all these different possibilities. Those possibilities can, of course, be mixed and matched by those different applications, but I will start with theater. Theater, when you open for the first time Ovation, it proposes you to open some templates. And I very simply opened a theater template that looks like this. And in this theater template, you have one standard cue list, and you have show properties, cue list properties, and cue properties. And down here, you have a few different other windows, to which I will come a little bit later. First of all, my standard cue list, which is empty for the moment, will have to be filled up with audio material. So I just open a browser, and it happened to be here that I have some MP3 files, some pure mix media files, some wave sound, and so on. I just take the whole lot and drag it back in. First of all, what is very interesting to observe is that my Ovation can handle different file formats, different sample rates, different resolutions, at the same time, within the same cue list, but with, of course, other cue lists. It is then for me to set up the show, this specific show, into one sample rate with which it plays out, but it can handle all these different formats and plays them in real time on the fly directly in the proper sample rate and in the proper resolution. Well, down here, I have a called active cue window that allows me to see the cue that I can play back and just read if I want to. I have some little editor to top and tail it if I want to, little fade also. Then if I scroll through those different types of cues here, I see just one suddenly that I have something else in stereo, which brings me then to the possibility, and this is a great tool in there, I have some multitrack. So directly I can drag and drop some multitrack material in there and play it back. This is a standard cue list in which I have different types of cues, as I mentioned. Now, show properties, cue properties, cue list properties, and cue properties, specifically the cue properties, are now the properties linked to every one of these different cues. For example, the gain, for example, the name of it, and down here, all types of synchronizations over IP, over MIDI, over GPI, over RS, 232, 422, COM commands, IP commands, and so on. I will now create another cue list. And this time, I see I have the standard cue list, time cue list that I will see a little bit later, and hotkey cue list. Now I will take some material and drop some material in my hotkey cue list from another location. And there again, I drag and drop, doesn't matter what type of files or what formats they are. Now, the difference between the hotkey cue list and the standard cue list, that logically the standard cue list, I will launch one cue after each other. And the hotkey cue list, I can now hot cue them as I want with a touch screen, with a keyboard, or with whatever. I can interact it differently. The thing is that, again, in the cue property, I can also set now for this very button to say toggle play stop, play from start, or press and release, for example. So it means that as long as I haven't depressed the button, it will continue to play, and so on and so on. Great. Now, those different cue lists also, if I go into cue list property this time, have some different audio output slot. One thing I didn't mention is that my Ovation cue lists are, of course, linked to a mixer. This mixer that I just opened now is very simple. That's the one that it is in the template, which has more, but for the moment I just show 16 faders, 16 mono channels. And I can, of course, say that individually each cue goes out to a different channel, or for example, the cue list, this cue list goes specifically to one or a certain amount of channels, and this cue list to another amount of channels. It depends then the content of those cues. As you know, there are some that are mono, stereo, multi-channel, and so on and so on. And this is called slot in the Ovation terminology. So here I can say I want this cue list now. Which cue list am I? I'm in the standard cue list. Let me go into this cue list that I will call hotkey, sorry. There we go. And I will start at the cue list 5. So now that when I'm playing, those guys, they will go into channel 1 and 2 for the moment as their stereo files. This one will now be played through all the 24 channels, obviously. It will take a while because I will pause this one because the start isn't imminent. But now I see already the silent. There we go. It plays through all the channels because it's a multi-track. But those guys, they will play on channel 5 and 6. And of course, this could be then sent through my mixer to be summed to go out, what I have here. But if I wish, I can also send those guys back to a direct out, so I have them back on the mixer desk. This is as I want. I can really configure everything the way I want. One last thing I want to mention is that in Ovation, we have a great tool about redundancy, which is of course important in theater, that I can have a second system, for example, running at the same time, the same show with the same commands, and it will of course take over with my commands and all of that as soon, for whatever reason, my first system fails. So there's a complete redundancy scheme behind that is able to run both systems at the same time. Now, in my next part, I'm gonna talk about applications for the opera. We, of course, gonna use the same things and the same possibilities that theater people will use, but a few more things that are very interesting. First of all, I can go here into show properties, and I can see here that in my show mode, I haven't properly seen yet what the show mode is. But basically, when I start the show, I have here 4 blue buttons: init show, start show, post show, stop show. It's obviously to go into a show mode when we're gonna still use the show. Then here, show mode, I can set a starting point of the show, or more interestingly, typically for the opera, time of the day. So it means that now if I'm gonna initialize the show, I see that it will jump directly to the time of the day that we are now, and it will use it as a reference. So every evening I can use the time of the day if I'm specifically linked to certain things that have to happen at a certain time. Same thing, of course, I can also link it to an external time code coming in, or I can generate time code because I want to synchronize different devices together with the light, with effects, with other things. Good. Now the other thing is that other type of cue lists is that here, I've mentioned it briefly just before, I have some time queued list, which I have opened now. Just quickly, I can of course have as many cue lists as I want. There is no limitation in that matter. I now import some audio into this timed cue list that we are here. And in my cue properties, I can now say, if I go a little bit down, that this cue, for example, goes at, let's say, 5 seconds. Sorry, I missed the 5. There we go. The next cue will go at 10 seconds. This cue will go at 12 seconds. And this cue will go at 15 seconds. I see also that on the cue list itself, it writes the time down. Go. This cue list property now can be independent. I'm on the right cue list. Now, if I go to the other cue list, it would show it differently. Now here, time mode chasing, no. Otherwise, I could chase it with the general time code. That is the time of the day, but I say no for the moment. And I can also set a start point, that it starts automatically after a certain time. So just to show you in the idea, if I init the show, I start the show. Now this window changed here. So again, as before, I start my different things, my different queues as I wanted. And this one, this independent queue list is launched now as I press start. After 5 seconds, the first queue plays. At 10 seconds, the other one will play. There we go. At 12 seconds, if I'm remembering well, yes, and 15 seconds, the last one. So I have timed queued lists that I can directly interact because there are some precise things happening at precise moments every evening. So I can manage this. The other thing, which is very interesting, is that every queue, has a specific what we call interaction rule tab or window. It means that this interaction rule, as the name gives it, interacts with something else. It can, for example, interact that when I launch this queue, it will launch the other queue at the same time. Or when I launch this queue, it will launch this time queue list. Or, for example, let me do here an empty queue. There we go. And this queue, I see here on each queue I'm clicking, it will open the appropriate queue properties. Now I have those 3 dots there. It will open my interaction rule window, and I can say I want to dim, for example, all queues when starting with a little fade of 1 second and a fade out of 1 second. So let's make it nice. By -50 dB, add rule. There we go. And I can change the name of it, and I call it dim. I see also that the sign on it is different. There's an exclamation one. The other ones have a loudspeaker because they are audio content. This one is empty. It could have some audio content as well, but it has an interaction rule. Now, it means that when I start, I will start my show. Again, I will play my different signals, my different things, the time queue list, and so on. And I see now that my signal is where it is, nearly at 0 or even above 0 for some queues. If I press now the dim, it will all dim in 1 second by 40 dB. And if I remove the dim, it will go back to its normal status. So you see the interaction rule can affect, as it is now, all the queues or some specific queues. I can really manage it as I want. It means that I can say also that, for example, this queue here will simply just fire the cue list, which is timed, the number 3. And when starting, add rule, and that's it. So it means that start the show. Again, I launch those different items. And when I want to start this cue list, I just press there, and it automatically will now start this cue list. I see it counts from 1 at 5. It will start that. So I can really interact heavily with different devices together. The last thing, which is very important, is that often we go back and forth each time between the rehearsal and the show. Between the rehearsal and we want to edit things and rehearse again and to edit things. So in this case, we have a very interesting feature that behind we have a proper workstation called Pyramix that perhaps for some of you are familiar with. So I take now this cue, for example, and I press edit. Automatically it will show up here. I see also in my cue here, I have my in and my out point that I will move on purpose to make it obvious. And I say edit. These are actually my green and my red markers that I found here. So I can move them again. I can perhaps make a proper fade out here that I can draw if I want. And I say project, Ovation, publish to Ovation, and it edited here directly. So it updates the edit. To go a bit further now, I will take another one and I say edit. And now I'm gonna make some proper editing. So it means that I'm gonna make some copy here, some copy there, bring this guy up here, make a crossfade, make another copy down here, say that this one I want it -9 dB, make this, make a proper cut like this, like that, slide some media behind, and make a very long fade out. This can of course all be prepared whenever you want. Project, Ovation, and this time I'm not gonna override the existing cue, but I'm gonna create a new cue, which is here. So now I created a new cue which contains all the different cues that I've just done, which is here, I see, and it's a complete new cue which is multi-track without the bouncing of it. So you gain a tremendous amount of time, plus you're constantly with this rehearsing and trying out possibilities. Now I want to show you a little bit what Ovation can do for live mixing. So we've seen that in my mixer we had some mono channels that could be back on a desk if I want to, if it's something that people want to work with, of course, but let's remain internal. And we have the different cues playing out on different strips, channels of my mixer. Now we can construct a mixer the way we want it. So first of all, I'm gonna add some few channels here. Stereo channels, for example. I'm gonna add 4 channels. I'm gonna put them way back. And I'm gonna add also some multi-channel strip. For example, numbers of channels, I'm gonna make some 13.1, generic 13 channel, 13.1 Aura channel, for example, as I have some Aura signal coming back to me, which be some immersive audio. And therefore, I would also need, for example, a 13.1 bus to be able to play it out. There we go. So now I created already a bit more complex mixer. And it means that those are not, for the moment, assignated to some cues. So it means I can use them really as live inputs. And I see here my 13.1 strip and my different channels. Of course, my 30.1 strip has a proper panner as well that will allow me to properly pan my signal in there. For some specific and precise details about it, you could refer yourself to another video specifically talking about the Audio 3D with Ovation. Great. Now, those different types of inputs for the moment, or for strips, I can manage to have, for example, another cue, which is called here, sorry, I just stop it, there we go. So, which is called, for example, input 13.1. And here down there, I have a microphone input possibility that will now, I have to count the numbers of channels, start at channel, let me go 17, plus 13, that makes 30. Well, 13.1, that makes 31. So for this queue now, when I launch this, it will automatically make my inputs available on those channels. So whatever microphones or signal that is sent to will then go through my mixer. And then, of course, I route it normally through my mixer. So it's a very, very powerful tool in the live event as well. Even though that in this mixer, for example, when I launch this, I can add here a little marker after a few seconds, for example. And this marker has itself an interaction rule where I would say, okay, you can fire, for example, another cue, or you can pause another cue, or whatever when it's ending, when it's starting, basically an interaction rule again. So this I can really manage the way I want it. One interesting thing also, if I go back now to a normal standard stereo channel, is that I have a gain matrix with sizes of inputs and outputs. And here also, each of those different things, I can now send it to different inputs and different outputs. Wait, I just make it a little bit bigger so one can see properly how it works. My left and my right channel to different, I set it now to 5 different outputs that I can manage here directly. So this is also a very interesting way of looking at things. The last application I want to talk to you about is installation. Museums, installation, audio installation, or other type of installations, outside installations, shopping malls as well happens, is that this system can run all on itself. In the morning, wake up, do its show, in the evening, close down again, and do the same thing tomorrow. There's some system installed working since 4 years like this. But going a bit more in depth, I wanted to show you 2 things about automation, snapshot automation, and some plugins in the mixer. Before that, just want to explain you one thing in terms of the system structure. We work, of course, if we wish, on a native structure, meaning that we will use the OS, so it will have its latency, it will have its number of track count that it's limited. And we have our own engine called Mascore, which is basically a layer underneath the OS, which reserves one or more than one core for itself. And for that, we have a tremendous numbers of track count, basically 384 plus 256 buses, will then go over the Ravenna structure. And we have also a limited latency between my in and my outputs, which is, of course, crucial for live and for installation in general, for all types of application like that. Coming now back to my mixer, my mixer for the moment has been static. So it means that this mixer has been static the way it is, and now I would like to add some movement to this mixer. So for that, I will create a queue. Short queue, for example, that I will call snap 1. You will understand in a second why. There we go. Yeah, I just have to write it properly. Snap 1. And now I have here, underneath all my communication possibilities over MIDI, RS, and so on, as we saw already, mix automation. I have snapshot, and now it will take a photography, basically, of the status of the mixer as it is now. I can make my entire mixer, or just a few strips, or even just a detailed button of something, of a plugin, for example. Let's do the whole mixer. This is my whole mixer, and I will do it instantly, or a glide, let's say, over 15 seconds. And now I will do a second cue, which I will call, sorry, I just mixed it up. This is snapshot 1. I will call, make a second cue, which is here, that I will call snapshot snapshot 2 or snap 2. And this time my mixer will have a complete different status. Like this, and of course I can move the pannings around. I can move those pannings around. I can really manage this as I want. And here I can move all those pannings like this. And this will be my snapshot number 2, which is down here, sorry. And now again, I write over it, and in 15 seconds from one snapshot to the other, it will change the status of the entire mixer from one point to another. And it will apply it independently of the audio I passed through. This is the beauty of it. My cues are independent, my audio cues talking about, my audio streams are independent of my snapshot. So I can launch them whenever I want. I then have my mixer, where I have some quality plugins on that, mono stereo, but also multi-channel plugins. So it means that I will have proper multi-channel reverbs involved in there, which are very interesting to see. And I can have now the possibility to have those plugins directly in here and mixing all of that together. A few last things to talk about. First of all, once I worked with all the project with different locations from my medias and so on, I can pack all of it, pack the show, because I will go on tour or whatever, just to have it all on one location. This is one thing. I have a show logger in case there's a problem with a rule or GPI that doesn't work or whatever. So it will tell me where and why. And I have a show validator, which then analyzes all the interaction rules, for example, or also analyzes if there is properly the media behind my cue, so that it's able to buffer it and tell me when there's a mistake or an error. So I hope that I could help you, or at least give you some more ideas about what Ovation is. Thank you very much for listening. You will have, of course, more information and also an evaluation version of Ovation on our Merging website, which is of course limited. But if you want to have a proper view at it, our distributor in all countries will be happy to help you. Just go on our website and you will find all details about your country.